The three most dangerous spiritual energies around the dead. Edgar Cayce's warning. What if the moment after death isn't the end of danger, but the beginning of the most critical test your soul will ever face? Pause with that, because everything you've been taught about death, the hymns, the white light, the peaceful surrender, might be only half the story. The other half? Three energies wait at the threshold, ancient, intelligent, and capable of trapping consciousness for centuries. They don't announce themselves. They don't wear horns or halos. They simply arrive. In the space between your last breath and whatever comes next, they're there, watching, waiting, drawing close to the frequency you carry. This isn't superstition. It's not folklore whispered around campfires. This is the testimony of Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet who conducted over 14,000 psychic readings while in deep trance, a man who accessed what he called the Akashic records, the infinite library of every soul's journey, and in those readings, again and again, he saw the same pattern: three energies, three tests, three ways a soul can become trapped in the borderlands between worlds. The first energy disguises itself as love. The second hides in the body's final whispers. And the third wears your face. You might think you're ready. You might believe that a good life guarantees a smooth crossing. But Cayce saw something else. He saw that what meets you in death isn't random. It's attracted by what you carry, your unfinished business, your addictions, the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime refusing to see. And if you don't recognize them, if you don't know how to move through them, you can become what Cayce called earthbound, conscious, aware, but trapped, unable to move forward, unable to return, caught in a psychic loop that can last decades, centuries, lifetimes stacked in the space between heartbeats. But here's the truth that carries hope. You can prepare, right now, in this life, in this breath. You can learn to recognize these energies. You can practice the release they demand. You can attune your consciousness to the frequency that walks through the threshold untouched. This is your initiation, your map, your warning, and your promise. Because the sleeping prophet left more than warnings. He left instructions. And the first instruction begins with understanding what death actually is. Chapter 1. The Sleeping Prophet Speaks. Cayce's Death Maps. His name was Edgar Cayce. To some, he was America's most mysterious man. To others, a charlatan. To thousands who sought his counsel, he was simply the sleeping prophet. Twice a day, Cayce would lie down, loosen his tie, fold his hands across his chest, and enter a self-induced trance so deep that his conscious mind would vanish entirely. And in that state, eyes closed, body still, voice slow and measured, he would speak. Not with his own knowledge, not with his own voice, really, but with access to something he could never explain when awake. A vast field of information he called the Akashic records, the energetic imprint of every soul's journey, every choice, every incarnation, every lesson learned and unlearned across time. For over 40 years, from his home in Virginia Beach, Cayce gave readings on everything from health to past lives to the nature of the cosmos. 14,000 documented sessions, each one transcribed by his secretary, preserved, studied, and woven through thousands of those readings, was a consistent, sometimes unsettling theme. Death is not the end, but neither is it automatic ascension. Cayce didn't speak the language of heaven and hell. He didn't preach salvation through belief or damnation through sin. His cosmology was more intricate than that, more personal. He described death as a transition, a vibrational shift where consciousness leaves the dense physical plane and enters what he called the borderland, or astral threshold, a plane of existence that mirrors thought itself. where mind is the builder. That phrase appears again and again in his readings. Mind is the builder. It means that consciousness doesn't just observe reality, it constructs it, especially in the afterlife, where the physical body no longer anchors perception. Your beliefs become your environment. Your fears become your landscape. Your unresolved emotions become the walls of the rooms you inhabit. And in those rooms, at that threshold, Cayce saw patterns. 3 energies appeared again and again in his death transition readings. Not demons, not angels, but forces, psychic, magnetic, ancient, that every soul encounters, not because they're sent as punishment, but because they reflect what the soul carries. They are mirrors, and mirrors can trap you if you don't recognize your own reflection. Cayce's readings weren't theological speculation, they were observational reports. He would enter trance, tune into a soul's frequency, and describe what he saw, where they were, what held them, what they needed to release. And the consistency was undeniable. Some souls moved through the threshold easily, guided by light, by love, by what Cayce called the Christ consciousness, a universal presence of compassion that meets every soul without judgment. But others lingered, caught in grief, chained by appetite, confronted by a shadow self they couldn't bear to face, not punished, not abandoned, just paused, waiting for the moment they would choose differently, waiting for the recognition that would set them free. Cayce never claimed to have all the answers. He was humble about the mystery, but he was insistent about the patterns. And the first pattern, the first energy, is the one most people mistake for love, because attachment, when it crosses the threshold, becomes a cage with invisible bars, and the soul inside doesn't always realize it's locked. Chapter 2. The Threshold Doctrine, Crossing Without Body. Imagine this. You take your last breath, your heart stills. The sounds of the room begin to fade. Voices, machines, the hum of the world you've known. And then you're still here, still conscious, still you, but the body is gone. No weight, no breath, no boundary between where you end and the air begins. This is the threshold Cayce described, the borderland, the astral plane where the soul first arrives after physical death. It's not heaven, it's not hell, it's not a place at all, really. Not in the way we think of places. It's more like a frequency, a vibrational layer of reality where consciousness exists without density. And here's the part that changes everything. You're still you, all your memories intact, all your fears, your loves, your regrets, your unfinished business, the jealousy you never admitted, the addiction you never conquered, the person you never forgave. It all crosses with you. Because the soul doesn't shed identity at death, it sheds the body, and the body, it turns out, was never the prison. The prison is the belief that you are only what you were, the refusal to let go, the clinging to form, to story, to the life you just left. And in this state, conscious but unanchored, the soul becomes hypersensitive. Thought becomes environment. Emotion becomes landscape. If you're afraid, the threshold feels cold, shadowed, narrow. If you're at peace, it opens like a meadow at dawn, filled with light and presence. Cayce described it as a hall of mirrors, each mirror reflecting not your face, but your inner world, your hidden hungers, your denied truths, the parts of yourself you've been running from. And in this hall, 3 energies approach. They don't attack you. They don't need to. They simply match your frequency. They're drawn to what you carry. Like calls to like. Density calls to density. The first energy comes softly. It comes with familiar faces. It comes with a voice you recognize, calling your name. It feels like love. It feels like home. It feels like the most natural thing in the world to turn back, to stay close, to linger just a little longer. But it's not love. It's attachment, and attachment in the afterlife, is a chain made of longing. Chapter 3, Energy 1, The Attachment Phantom, Love That Binds. She couldn't leave her children. That's what Cayce saw in the reading. A mother, recently deceased, still hovering in the family home. Not a ghost in the horror movie sense. Not malevolent, not even aware, really, that she'd crossed over. She was simply there, standing in the kitchen where she used to cook, sitting at the edge of her daughter's bed at night, smoothing invisible hair, weeping in the hallway when her husband packed her clothes away. She was trapped, not by demons, not by divine punishment, by love, or what she believed was love. This is the first dangerous energy Cayce warned about, the one that feels the most righteous, the most natural, unresolved earthly attachment. It doesn't announce itself as a threat. It comes disguised as devotion, as duty, as unfinished business that must be resolved. It comes as the faces of the people you left behind, your children, your spouse, your parents, your best friend, the ones you couldn't say goodbye to, the ones you're not ready to release. And it whispers, stay, just a little longer. They need you. You're not done. You can't leave them yet. And the soul, still tender, still disoriented, still carrying the emotional imprint of life, believes it. Cayce described these souls as earthbound. Conscious, yes, but vibrationally anchored to the physical plane, unable to perceive the guides waiting just beyond their grief, unable to hear the call toward higher realms. They linger in hospitals, in bedrooms, in the last place they felt needed, and time, in that state, becomes strange. What feels like hours might be years. What feels like vigil might be a century-long haunting, not because they're being punished, but because they haven't yet learned the difference between love and clinging. Listen closely to this. Attachment isn't wrong, but it's developmental. In life, attachment is how we bond, how we care, how we build families and friendships and meaning. It's necessary, it's beautiful, but at death, attachment becomes obsolete, because the soul's journey is forward, not backward, toward integration, not repetition, toward the next plane of learning, not the last plane of experience. And the soul that clings to a person, to a place, to a role it once played, arrests its own growth. Cayce told the story of a soldier who couldn't leave the battlefield, not because he was angry, not because he sought revenge, but because he believed his duty wasn't finished. He believed his brothers in arms still needed him. So he stayed, for decades, watching, guarding, unable to see that the war was over, unable to see that the only prisoner left was himself. The trap isn't cruel, it's magnetic. The soul mistakes memory for mission. It mistakes the echo of love for the presence of love. And in that mistake, it builds a room with no doors. But here's the paradox. The very people the soul clings to, the children, the spouse, the friends, they feel it. Not always consciously, but energetically. They feel the weight of being watched, the sense that someone's still there, the inexplicable pull toward grief that won't lift, sadness that won't fade, and their grief, in turn, becomes an anchor, a psychic chain that binds both the living and the dead. Cayce was clear about this. Excessive mourning can trap the departed, not because grief is wrong, it's human, it's necessary, but because grief that refuses to release, that insists on keeping the dead close, creates a vibrational bond that holds them in place. The most loving thing you can do for the dead is to bless their journey, to release them, to say, not with indifference, but with trust, go. I love you, I'll see you again, but go. Because the soul that lingers at the threshold isn't truly with you anyway. It's in a twilight space, half present, half absent, neither fully alive nor fully free, and the longer it stays, the harder it becomes to leave. Attachment isn't evil, but it's the first energy, the first test, The first invitation to choose release over repetition. And if the soul doesn't pass this test, the second energy arrives. And this one doesn't come from outside. It comes from within, from the body's final phantom whispers. Chapter 4, Energy 2, The Craving Residue, Flesh's Last Whisper. Imagine thirst with no throat, hunger with no mouth, the ache of addiction with no hands to reach, no bloodstream to flood, no relief possible. This is the second dangerous energy Cayce encountered in his readings. Not an external force, not a spirit or demon, but a residue, the energetic echo of physical desire that outlives the body itself. Here's what Cayce saw again and again. Souls who, in life, were enslaved to substances, alcohol, drugs, food, sex, rage, gambling, power, crossed the threshold still feeling the craving, still driven by the appetite, still identified with the body's hungers, but the body was gone, and the craving remained, like a phantom limb, except the phantom is your entire sense of self. Cayce described these souls with a mixture of horror and deep compassion. They were not bad people. They were not being punished for their addictions. They were simply still attached to density, still believing that satisfaction comes from taking something in rather than being something. And without a body to mediate the craving, the soul spirals. It hovers near bars, near hospitals, near places where the living indulge in the same substances. And it does something Cayce found deeply troubling. It feeds on the living, not literally, not violently, but energetically. The soul latches onto someone with a matching frequency, someone drinking, someone using, someone lost in rage or lust, and experiences the sensation secondhand, through proximity, through psychic osmosis. This is what Cayce meant when he spoke of possession in certain cases. Not demons from hell, but earthbound souls, so desperate for relief that they attach themselves to the living, influencing thoughts, amplifying cravings, creating intrusive urges that don't quite feel like your own. And the living person? They feel it. A sudden, overwhelming compulsion. A darkness they can't explain. A sense that something else is pushing them toward the edge. Both sides suffer. Both sides descend. The living person spirals deeper into addiction, haunted by a presence they can't name. And the dead soul, feeding but never satisfied, sinks further into what Cayce called the lower astral planes, dense, shadowed realms where consciousness loops endlessly in illusion. But here's the key. The soul isn't trapped by the craving itself. It's trapped by the belief that the craving defines it. It still thinks, I am this hunger. I am this need. I am incomplete without this substance. And as long as it believes that, it cannot move forward. Cayce's guidance was both simple and devastating. The soul must recognize that the body is gone. It must choose to release identification with physical appetite. It must remember that it is consciousness, eternal, complete, needing nothing from the material plane to exist. But that recognition requires something most addicted souls don't have in the moment of death. Awareness. Awareness of self as separate from craving. Awareness of the body as tool, not identity. Awareness that the ache is an echo, not a truth. And if the soul had no practice with that awareness in life, if it never learned to witness its cravings without being consumed by them, then death offers no automatic enlightenment. It offers only continuation, the same patterns, the same loops, just without the body that once masked the soul's emptiness. This is why Cayce emphasized preparation, why he taught that the spiritual work you do now, the self-examination, the meditation, the practice of observing desire without immediately fulfilling it, is training for the threshold. Every time you feel a craving and pause before acting, you're strengthening the muscle of awareness. You're proving to your soul that you are not the hunger. You are the one who notices the hunger, and that distinction in the afterlife is everything, because the soul that knows itself as consciousness can release the craving. It can say, with compassion and finality, that was the body's story, not mine, and in that release, it rises. But the soul that cannot release, that still claws at the phantom of satisfaction, it lingers, it loops, it becomes what Cayce called a wanderer, a consciousness drifting through the lower astral planes, neither alive nor truly free, waiting for the moment it finally chooses to let go. And sometimes that moment takes lifetimes. But even this desperate, craving, clinging state is not the deepest danger, because the third energy doesn't come from loved ones or from physical appetites. It comes from the part of yourself you've spent a lifetime pretending doesn't exist. It comes from the shadow, and when you meet it at the threshold, it will know you better than you know yourself. Chapter 5. Energy 3. The Shadow Construct, Meeting Your Anti-Self. There's a moment in every soul's journey after death when the distractions fall away. The loved ones, the cravings, the excuses, and you're left standing in silence, alone, except you're not alone. Someone is there, watching, waiting, and when you turn to face them, you see something that stops your breath, yourself, but not the self you showed the world, not the self you believed you were. This is the version of you that you denied, the one you buried, the one you refused to acknowledge in every mirror, every quiet moment, every time someone pointed out your cruelty and you deflected. This is the shadow, and in Cayce's readings, it's the most dangerous energy of all. He called it many things across thousands of sessions: the dweller on the threshold, the guardian, the dark double. But the essence was always the same. It is you, inverted, everything you judged, rejected, repressed, and exiled from your sense of self, now given autonomous form. All your cruelty, your cowardice, your lies, your betrayals, your violence, even the violence of silence, your selfishness, your envy, your lust for control. Every time you looked away from suffering, every time you chose comfort over truth, it's all there, standing in front of you, wearing your face, and it knows you completely. It speaks with your voice. It uses your memories. It knows exactly what will hurt you, shame you, break you, because it is you, the part you disowned. Cayce described souls encountering this shadow self at the threshold and reacting in one of three ways. Denial. That's not me. I'm not like that. That's something else, something evil, something trying to trick me. Flee. Running from it, turning back toward the physical plane, clinging to earthbound spaces where the shadow can't fully manifest. Fight. Trying to destroy it, exile it again, push it away with fear and rage. And here's the terrible truth. Every one of those reactions feeds it, strengthens it, locks the soul in a confrontation that can last for what feels like eternity. Because you cannot outrun yourself. You cannot destroy what is already you. You cannot exile the shadow into non-existence. It will wait, and wait, and wait, until you do the one thing most souls are terrified to do: embrace it. This is Cayce's radical teaching, echoed across his most spiritually advanced readings. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your fragmented consciousness demanding reintegration. It is the part of you that was split off in shame, in fear, in judgment. And it has been waiting, sometimes for lifetimes, to be seen, to be owned, to be loved, back into wholeness. Jung spoke of this in psychological terms, the shadow as the unconscious repository of everything the ego rejects, and the lifelong work of individuation as learning to integrate the shadow, to make the unconscious conscious, to own the fullness of who you are. But Cayce added something Jung could only hint at. In the afterlife, the stakes are metaphysical. Denial of the shadow doesn't just create neurosis, it creates entrapment. The soul cannot ascend to higher planes of consciousness while still rejecting itself. It cannot move into the light while casting parts of itself into darkness. The shadow, in Cayce's cosmology, is the final gatekeeper, the ultimate test of self-acceptance. And the only way through is to stop, to turn, to face it fully, and to say the words that dissolve every illusion. You are me. I see you. I own you. I reclaim you, not with fear, not with shame, but with compassion. Because the shadow isn't evil, it's unloved. It's the part of you that acted from wound, from fear, from ignorance. And it has been waiting across lifetimes for the moment you would stop running and simply acknowledge it. Cayce described what happens when a soul does this. When it stops fleeing and opens its arms to its own darkness, the shadow self doesn't attack. It doesn't laugh or gloat or drag the soul into hell. It dissolves, like mist in sunlight, like a bad dream upon waking, because it was never real, not as a separate entity. It was always just fragmented consciousness, your consciousness, waiting to come home. And when it does, the soul becomes luminous, whole, integrated, no longer split between the self it shows and the self it hides. This is the passage. This is the threshold crossed. This is what Cayce called graduation from the astral plane into the higher realms, the planetary sojourns, the soul review, the next stage of learning. But the soul that cannot face its shadow, that runs, denies, fights, it stays, looping, trapped in a confrontation with itself that has no end, not because it's being punished, but because it's refusing the very thing that would set it free. And the cruelest part, the most heartbreaking part, the shadow never wanted to trap you. It only ever wanted to be seen. Chapter 6. The Preparation Doctrine, Attunement Before Death. So what do you do with this? These three energies, attachment, craving, shadow, these tests waiting at the threshold. You might feel the weight of it, the impossibility. How do you prepare for something you can't fully imagine? How do you train for a moment you've never experienced? Cayce's answer was both simple and demanding. You take yourself with you. Death doesn't erase you. It doesn't wipe your consciousness clean and start fresh. It reveals you. Every choice you've made, every pattern you've built, every wound you've refused to heal. The afterlife isn't about judgment from an external God. It's about confrontation with your own truth. And the best time to meet that truth? Right now. While you still have a body. While you still have time. While you still have the gift of density, the physical world, as your training ground. Cayce gave 4 core practices in his readings, woven through thousands of sessions, for preparing the soul to navigate the threshold with grace. First, self-examination without shame. Every day take inventory, not with the goal of perfection, but with the goal of awareness. What are you clinging to? What would you struggle to release if you died tonight? Who would you haunt? What would pull you back? Ask yourself, where do I still believe I'm incomplete without someone or something outside of me? This isn't about judging yourself. It's about seeing yourself clearly, because the soul that knows its attachments before death can release them consciously, with love, when the moment comes. Second, service to others. Cayce was insistent. The soul that lives only for itself builds nothing that survives death. But the soul that gives, that serves, that loves without condition, that eases suffering wherever it finds it, builds what he called the higher self, not as some separate entity, but as the part of you that operates from love rather than fear, from abundance rather than lack, from presence rather than grasping. And that higher self, that loving self, it becomes your guide in the afterlife. It's the part of you that recognizes the light, that hears the call of higher realms, that can walk past attachment and craving and shadow without being trapped. Third, meditation and attunement. This is where Cayce's teachings get deeply practical. He taught that meditation isn't just about relaxation or stress relief. It's about practicing consciousness without the body. Every time you close your eyes and enter deep meditation, you're rehearsing the after-death state. You're learning to exist as awareness, not sensation, as presence, not form. You're proving to yourself that you are not the body. You are the one observing the body, and that distinction, that experiential knowing, is what allows the soul to release the physical plane without panic when the time comes. Fourth, forgiveness protocols. Cayce called it releasing karmic hooks, the people you resent, the wounds you nurse, the grudges you carry like badges of honor. Every unresolved hurt is an energetic chain, and when you die, those chains don't dissolve. They pull, they anchor, they draw you back toward the people and situations you never forgave. Forgiveness isn't about condoning harm. It's not about pretending everything was fine. It's about releasing the energetic bond so that you and they can move forward. Cayce's forgiveness practice was simple. Visualize the person, say their name, and speak aloud or silently, "I release you, I forgive you, I free myself from carrying this. I trust that your soul's journey is between you and the divine. I reclaim my peace," and then let it go. Not because you'll never feel the pain again, but because you've chosen not to let it define you. These 4 practices aren't about becoming good enough for heaven. They're not about earning your way into the light. They're about becoming awake. Awake to who you truly are, awake to what you carry, awake to the parts of yourself that need love, release, and integration. Because the threshold doesn't care about your theology. It doesn't ask if you believed the right doctrine or attended the right church or prayed the right prayers. It asks one question: do you know yourself? And if the answer is yes, if you've done the work, if you've faced your attachments, your cravings, your shadow with honesty and love, then the 3 energies aren't dangerous at all. They're just passages, tests you've already taken 1,000 times in life. And you walk through them the same way you've learned to walk through fear, through loss, through change, by recognizing that you are not what you're releasing. You are the consciousness that releases. But what happens when a soul hasn't prepared? When a soul encounters these energies without awareness, without practice, without the muscle of self-examination? That's when the borderland becomes a prison. That's when the soul becomes earthbound. And the question becomes, how long can a consciousness stay trapped between worlds? According to Cayce, centuries. Chapter 7, The Earthbound Condition, Trapped Between Worlds. There's a particular sadness in Cayce's readings when he describes the earthbound. Not anger, not judgment, just sadness. Because these are souls who loved too tightly, who craved too deeply, who denied too completely, and now they're stuck, not in hell, not in some fiery pit of eternal torment, but in a kind of twilight, a semi-conscious state where time loses meaning and the soul loops endlessly through familiar patterns, unable to perceive the way forward. Cayce called it the earthbound condition, a vibrational state where consciousness remains anchored to the physical plane even after the body is gone. And it's not rare. In fact, in Cayce's readings, it seemed disturbingly common, especially among souls who died suddenly, violently, or while deeply attached to unfinished business. What does it look like? Imagine a man who died in a car accident, one moment driving, the next disoriented. He wakes up at the crash site, confused. He sees his body being pulled from the wreckage, but he doesn't understand that it's his body. He tries to flag down help, but no one sees him, no one hears him, so he goes home, to his house, to his wife, his children, and he stays, for years, for decades, watching them grieve, watching them move on, watching his wife eventually remarry, his children grow up, the house sold to strangers, and through it all, he remains invisible, inaudible, trapped in a psychic loop of confusion and attachment, unable to perceive the guides calling him toward higher realms because his consciousness is too dense, too focused on what he lost. Or imagine a woman who died after years of alcoholism. She crosses the threshold still craving the drink, still believing she's incomplete without it. She haunts the bar where she used to spend her evenings, drawn to the warmth, the noise, the familiar smell. She watches others drink and feels the phantom satisfaction, the second-hand relief. And she loops, night after night, year after year, time stretching and compressing in ways that make no sense because time on the astral plane is subjective. She's not being punished. No demon is holding her there. She's simply choosing to stay, not consciously, but vibrationally. Her frequency matches the density of the physical plane, and she can't perceive anything higher because she hasn't yet released the craving that defines her. Cayce described the earthbound state as a developmental pause, not eternal, not irreversible, but sometimes lengthy. Years, decades. In some readings, he indicated that souls could remain earthbound for centuries, trapped in the same loop, the same location, the same unfinished story. Why can't they just leave? Because leaving requires a vibrational shift, a change in frequency, and that shift requires awareness, the ability to recognize that you're trapped, that the loop isn't serving you, that there's a higher state calling. But the earthbound soul is often too confused, too dense, too attached to even perceive the call. It's like trying to hear a radio station you're not tuned to. The signal is there, the guides are there, the light is there, but the soul's consciousness is so clouded by grief, by craving, by denial that it can't tune in. And here's the paradox Cayce spoke of often. The living can make it worse. Excessive grief, the kind that refuses to release, that demands the dead stay close, that can't imagine life without them, creates an energetic anchor. The grieving person, without realizing it, sends out a psychic call. Come back, stay with me, I need you, don't leave. And the soul, already disoriented, already attached, feels that call, and it stays, not out of love really, but out of resonance. Like to like, grief calling to grief. This is why Cayce was so clear about the importance of releasing the dead with blessing, not with clinging, not with indifference or cold detachment, but with trust. I love you. I honor your journey. I release you to your soul's path. We'll meet again, because that message, that energetic tone, gives the soul permission to move forward. It breaks the chain. It says, you are free. I am free. We are both free to continue. But when the living refuse to let go, when they turn the dead person's room into a shrine, when they speak to them as if they're still physically present year after year, the soul can become confused. It can believe it's still needed, still responsible, still tied to the living, and the earthbound condition deepens. But even in the deepest earthbound state, Cayce was clear. The soul is never alone. The soul is never abandoned, even in the loops, even in the twilight, even in the confusion. Guides are there, watching, waiting, calling gently from just beyond the density. They can't force the soul to turn. They can't drag it into the light, but they never stop calling. And the moment the soul turns even slightly toward that call, everything shifts. The loop breaks, the density lifts, the way forward opens, and the soul begins to move again. Chapter 8. The Guide Architecture. Helpers at the Threshold. You are never alone, even in the earthbound state, even in the loops, even in the darkest corner of the astral plane, where souls cling to their cravings and denials. You are never alone. This is Cayce's promise. And it's not sentimentality, it's structure, it's cosmology, it's the architecture of the afterlife as he saw it in reading after reading. There are guides, always, for everyone, no exceptions. Cayce called them by many names depending on the context of the reading. Spirit guides, elder souls, the Christ consciousness, guardian angels, sometimes simply helpers. But the essence was consistent. These are beings, or presences, or aspects of higher consciousness, who meet every soul at the threshold, not to judge, not to condemn, but to guide. They operate with infinite patience, infinite compassion, infinite respect for free will. They call, but they never drag. They illuminate the way forward, but they never force the soul to walk it, because in Cayce's cosmology, the soul's journey is sovereign. Even in death, even in confusion, even in suffering, the soul retains the power to choose, and the guides honor that. They stand at the edge of every room the soul builds in its mind, every loop it creates, every attachment it clings to, and they wait. They call gently, "You're ready. You can let go now. There's more. Come see." But if the soul doesn't hear, if the fear is too loud, the grief too thick, the craving too consuming,